The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz. Dan Rylance, my co-host, is here, and in this particular episode we're joined by two gentlemen who are here representing a group known as People First. We're going to find out what People First is, who it's a part of, and basically more about what they're doing. But in essence what they're doing is they're working to mobilize voters who have disabilities and special needs challenges to get them not just educated but registered to vote, and then actually they're going to be working to get them to the polls during the upcoming presidential elections. So it's kind of a noble project and kind of an interesting effort that is being put forth by these folks. So here to talk about it is someone who's familiar to our Eye on Oshkosh viewers, Bob Peschel. He's been here on a number of different issues over the last 5 years, and joining him is Eric Sween. Eric is also associated with People First, and this idea was actually kind of his brainstorm, I guess. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Let's find out exactly what People First is. Whoever wants to field that, go ahead.
It's people that help people with disabilities, helping them to get out the
people who actually they're self-advocates. People with disabilities helping people with disabilities to become more engaged in the community.
Okay. All right. And you were telling us before the start of the show, Bob, that it is actually part of what I think most of us used to know as the ARC.
Yes.
And now the ARC has a much bigger name. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but you
Sure.
can tell us.
Yeah, the People First started off as a program of ARC Winnebago County Disability Association. The ARC is an organization that uses the idea of self-determination as a way to go about helping people with disabilities. And that means helping them make their own choices and make right choices and valid choices within the community. So this is a program that we started out many years ago, probably in the 90s, and there's actually a much larger state organization, People First Wisconsin too. And so over the years, People First Oshkosh has kind of grown to become its own structure and to become its own organization, and to the point where they're talking about what issues that they want to take on, like accessibility and transportation and such like that, which are dire issues to someone who has physical needs and is disabled. So that's kind of the way that it's come about. This project kind of came about through the sense of Eric and I having a conversation about, what types of things can we do to strengthen and involve people with disabilities more in the community. And it's the stats show that people with disabilities are voting more, but they're still the lowest voting population that exists in the United States of America. And so we kind of took that and said, what can we do in our community? Okay. And that's kind of where we are with this.
You said that they're voting more, but they're still the lowest voting population in the country. Is that maybe because, in part at least, because the population itself is smaller than some of the other populations? Or give us some sense of the numbers here, Bob.
Well, the numbers the last numbers that I saw in the increase of what was the number of, I don't have the number of the people with disabilities that live in Winnebago County, but I know that the voting numbers have increased from 10% in 2000 up to 15% in 2004, and they're giving that increase to the idea of that state election boards are spending more time on working on accessibility at polling places and they're giving a lot of that increase to accessibility through the voting machines, the accessible voting machines that have been brought forward through HAVA.
Okay. Which is the Help America
Help
Vote
America
Act.
Vote
Yeah,
Act.
just a quick question. How do you come up with a figure? How do you determine percentage of people with disability that vote?
The way it's, how did they figure that out? It's based off of the census.
Okay.
So you get the number of who's all disabled, how many disabled are in an area through the census, and then I believe the number that I took it from is from the Harris polls.
Okay.
So, and what they have done is that they've actually polled at polling places people with disabilities. So.
I have to tell you, being a poll watcher for 10 years, I have seen a flat percentage. I have not. Now, I may be in places where there's a low percentage, but I've moved in Elby Hall, which was a university, and now I'm over at Webster Stanley, and I haven't seen an increase.
No. And that's a good point too. The increase is more in urban areas than it is in smaller urban areas. And so that increase would not be valid in Winnebago County, from my view.
I would
Yeah,
share that with
so,
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that it's more in urban areas? Is it because there's a higher concentration of people with special needs in those areas? Or is it that they have better means of getting to the polls because of better public transportation, perhaps, or what?
The challenge that goes along with the urban area, with people with disabilities in the urban areas, is that there are many more challenges in the urban areas for people with disabilities when it comes to polling places. And I think that's just because of the sheer number of people and the sheer number of polling places. Where here we have not as many polling places as, say, like Milwaukee, but we also have a lot more caring poll watchers and poll workers that play a much more involved role in making sure that people can go out and vote.
Okay.
So
Now, Eric, this was kind of your idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I like to follow politics a lot.
Sure.
I'm interested in politics, like to watch Hardball with Chris Matthews and all kind of that stuff.
Well, you're missing him tonight. Hopefully you're TiVoing him.
Yeah.
And of course, your interest in politics is also probably a little bit personal as well, because your dad is Don, who was on the school board for a term. Now, how long have you actually been interested in politics and voting? You've been a member of People First for what, 5 years? Something like that?
Could be.
Okay. I think that's what I was told. And so
Probably
you...
since high school, like politics.
Okay. Since high school. Wow.
Maybe longer than that.
Since the cradle, right? So how did you come up with this particular idea, to help get people not just educated on issues, but registered and then get them to the polls?
Because I think they have an important
Part to play.
yeah,
Yeah.
in our society of our
Okay.
society to
All right.
help get them to vote, get accessibility for them.
Did somebody help you along the way, to get you educated? I'm sure that, having a father who was in the school system for as long as your dad was, and then in politics and so forth, they probably just sort of instilled that in you as a young man, right? That it was important to go vote?
Yeah, our family does.
Sure. And so you came up with this idea, and what, you talked to Bob about it, or what did you do when you first came up with this idea?
Talk to Bob.
Okay, all right.
I don't have offhand what I really don't remember the
Don't remember what you told him. I have days like that too.
Yeah.
And they're becoming
Is
more
there a
frequent.
misconception that people with disabilities are only interested in disability issues rather than other issues? Eric, what's your most important issue in November?
Probably gas prices.
Okay.
Mm.
But that's not
It's
fair
not,
to say.
no.
But don't you think there's sort of a stereotype
There is.
that people are involved, are only involved because of the issues that affect them, and this isn't the case necessarily, is it?
It's not the case.
Yeah.
And I think you're very right in saying that. The idea, the stereotype that people with all different types of disabilities won't have the ability to understand or comprehend or interact within a community. And that's something that the people in the disabled community have been fighting for years. For years. And in 1990, when the Americans with Disability Act was passed, that changed a lot. That changed a lot. And we see that even now, 18 years later, that's still changing. And that they saw, well, some things worked then, and some things needed some change now, and we just got it passed. So I think that is a misconception in the sense that they are ordinary people.
Right.
They are ordinary people who have ordinary issues, who have the challenges of paying their paying their rent,
Right.
paying their gas bills, putting food in their fridge and on their tables, taking care of their families, all that. They have the same issues as just every ordinary citizen, except for when it comes to when they want to interact in the community sometimes.
Expand on that.
In that sense, there's so say a person with a physical disability, they have a wheelchair. They have to figure out transportation to go from point A to point B, whether that's for church, whether that's to go to the grocery store, whether that's to go to the YMCA. And then on top of that, there's other challenges when you're, say when you go to, well, I don't want to suggest that, or when you go to certain places in the community, and it's hard for a person to access a building or something, So, yeah, I think they have the same issues, but some of the issues that we take for granted, like I have a car, I can very easily, take my car from point A to point B, and that's, and that's the other thing that needs to be addressed is the idea of people with disabilities and poverty, and lack of education, and and all this stuff that privacy that comes with that. These are all issues that are extremely important to people with disabilities that get overlooked. So.
Well, in fact, according to the article in the Oshkosh Northwestern, where I first learned of your efforts, it said that long-term health care, employment, and transportation were three of the top issues for a lot of people with disabilities. Eric, other than gasoline prices, what concerns you, especially?
I know some of my friends ride the city bus, and on Sundays it doesn't run. Some people have problems with that.
Getting around on Sundays, sure.
Yeah.
So if you could make improvements or changes to the city transportation system, then having something that runs 7 days a week would be certainly something that you would be in favor of.
Yes.
Are there other changes that you would like to see with our city bus system?
Probably run later on, set up later than 6, probably 8
It
o'clock.
does stop at 6, so run until maybe 8.
Yeah.
Okay. What do other communities around here, how long do their buses run, do you know?
The Valley Transit runs into the well past 6 o'clock.
And that runs
So
from Oshkosh to
That-
Appleton?
No, that runs from Neenah to Appleton.
Neenah to Appleton,
So.
okay. It used to run from Oshkosh
They
up there,
do.
didn't it? And
They
then
have a
stopped, I guess.
connector. They have a connector that goes from Oshkosh to Neenah to Appleton.
Okay. All right. So you're trying to get people educated and registered. Other than through the ARC, and I'm just going to call it the ARC. I know
That's
there's a
fine.
bigger name for it, but
That's
it's
fine.
a half-hour program here, or a half-hour segment. Other than the ARC, how are you finding folks then to get registered? I mean, Dan
Sure.
kind of touched on that a little bit before, but
Yeah.
how do you find folks?
Yeah. Do you want to take that one? No?
So we have elections, have them register to vote at different places, like our summer picnic will have August 9th, 11:30 to 2:30 at Abe Rolshan Park.
Okay.
Okay.
And they can register at the Ability Resource Center at 115 Washington Avenue, 9 to 4 p.m. And here at City Clerk at City Hall.
Yep. So, and those are things that the ARC and People First are working coordinated with, minus City Clerk, of course.
Sure.
But we're working to get people registered at those types of events. So the other ways is that we're also going to try going and working with a lot of the consumers' homes,
Okay.
people who are in group home facilities and such like that. We're going to try to work out a way that we can come in and register people and educate them in that manner. The way of educating is that these are a lot of first-time voters, and so they need the thought of education isn't issue-oriented, it's action-oriented, and so it's getting people to understand and to become comfortable with the voting process. That needs to become a learned process. Our ultimate goal is to create lifetime voters. Is to instill people in the disabled community to go out and vote.
So you're not educating them so much, Bob, on the issues. You're educating, I mean, that might play a part in it, but you're educating them more on the electoral process.
The electoral
and how
process,
they go about being a part of it.
Yep, and showing them that they can be a part of it.
Okay.
So.
Well, with that, we got to touch on this, no pun intended. But as part of the Help America Act, Help America Vote Act, the government mandated touch screens, and I think you're opposed to those, aren't you?
Well, that's kind of a blanket statement to some extent. The disabled community.
The ones that we have.
Yeah. Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily, because they do in the sense of what they're supposed to do in the community. They offer something that is more accessible to someone who is blind in our community, and someone who has limited physical disabilities. They are more accessible to those people. So that's the extent of our feeling on it. As long as they are accessible to people with disabilities, we are fine with them.
And I think, and not to get real political, I think one of the problems that some of the people who are really opposed to the machines feel is, hey, it's great to have the accessibility, but there's, security concerns and such with the machines. And I think that's where some of the politics and some of the controversy comes in. But I think we can all agree that the accessibility is a great thing, and it was a wonderful thing that the government did to try and force counties and governing agencies to make things more accessible for folks like Eric.
And the HAVA is, in my mind, is a decent piece of legislation. I really wish that they would have gone to the point of not giving out exemptions for state governments to for entities that receive state funding. The motor voter aspect of this is that they gave an exemption. States can take exemptions to within the motor voter, and Wisconsin took that exemption, which makes it so that state or organizations that house people, that use state money to house people in communities, no longer have to register them to vote. The rules don't apply to them in this case, where in other states have said, we don't want that exemption. We think it's a great thing that if the state wants to give out money to organizations that house people, that it should go along with them. They should have to register them to vote. The challenge with it is that you have a nonprofit organization in the Oshkosh and the Winnebago County that is going out, that is working coordinatedly and going out and registering people with disabilities in their community in group homes that receive state funding, that receive county funding. That if they didn't have that exemption, that would be their job. They would be mandated to do it, and then we would have the next role that we would take on is education and mobilization. If we had if we had these entities helping out with registration, getting people to vote would be a lot easier.
Sure.
So
you have a small grant, I think the acronym is DAWN, for transportation. Is that correct, to get people to vote? I mean, to get them there to vote?
Yeah, we did receive a grant for amount of dollars that is built around the Get Out the Vote program.
Okay.
And what we did with that grant is that we budgeted money for transportation.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what we did with that is we said, well, there's transportation providers that have downtimes on those days. There are organizations that have wheelchair accessible vehicles that have downtime during those days. We have people who are willing to, or would like to have more people that are willing to drive people to the polls. And so we said, we're going to allocate a good chunk of cash to make sure that transportation is not an issue. for people when it comes down to voting day.
Clearly it is. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you can talk about machines, but if they can't get there to vote,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what machines
Yeah.
are. Huh?
And see, part of this grant is that it's set up to address barriers, barriers of education. People, one of the main issues that you hear when people with disabilities don't go, and this actually anyone, well, I don't know the issues,
Right.
I don't know the candidates, so I'm just not going to vote.
Right.
And so we allocated money to address that, talk about the issues. And so over time, over the next 3-4 months, we'll be doing a forum that talks about the presidential candidates and issues, and talking about those candidates so that people with disabilities can learn about that. And I step back a little bit too, is that this just isn't about people with disabilities. This is about their families.
Sure.
This is about their guardians, their caregivers, their staffs, the people who are inextricably connected to these people that make their lives happen. And that's the thing, is that people with disabilities, some can't live independently. And so is this idea of self-determination is to make it so they can live as independently as they want to. So.
Eric, do you have any goals for this? I mean, do you have any targets, or what would please you most after the presidential election this year in terms of this? Because you really are people first. I mean, that's part of your
Get
yeah.
a couple
What
gets are registered to vote and get 20 people to vote this year, maybe. I don't know how many our goal is.
Yeah.
yeah.
We've got when you set goals like this, you set them so that they're small, so that you can
Sure. No, I
have
understand.
large,
them,
so that you can have large growth.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have minimum goals that we want to
Sure.
meet,
Sure.
and I think we're going to meet those, Eric. I think
Yeah.
it's looking good already.
I think 20 would be a wonderful start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't think I've seen 20 disabled people in the 10 years of the polls where I've been a member. So 20 would be high.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever used the default voting? What machine do you use, Eric, when you go in to vote?
The one with the pen one.
Okay, you use the regular. You
Yeah.
take the ballot and go over and mark it with the black, and then go put it in the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's no trouble for you on that.
No.
No.
As part of your education then, Bob, do you, maybe bring folks down to City Hall and show them a sample Diebold machine? That's the touchscreen machine, and, show them how they use it? Or will the person who takes them to the polls on Election Day, if they've got
Yep.
someone taking them, will they be allowed to help
Yep.
them?
And actually, I think it was right after Diebold was introduced to the county, we actually had the Diebold representative bring in one of the machines to a People First meeting, and we invited tons of people. I think about 20 or 30 people showed up to all take part and to try out the machine. So that's something that we've already done. One idea that I'd like to see happen is to actually go through a mock election. Is to have a place, take out a hall, bring in some poll workers that are willing to volunteer their time and such like that, and bring in some of the machines and just give people a test run.
Sure.
So.
Eric, did you take part in the little exercise when they brought the Diebold machine in?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of years ago. I remember it.
What did you think of it? Did you like it? Was it easy to use, or what were your thoughts on it?
It was probably easy to use by using the pen better.
You like?
Yeah.
I probably do too. I'm
It's
kind
more
of
comfortable, isn't it?
yeah.
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 Kind of a creature of habit, but yeah, I
just-
do want to give it a try.
Yeah, no, I understand.
It's one of those things where you never want to be sitting there trying to do it when there's a big crowd of people.
I want to ask about absentee ballots. Now, I know the laws have changed on what an agent can do, but it seemed to me, and you can tell me what the law is, but if you could get absentee ballots to the disabled population, you don't have to deal with the issue
Yeah.
of transportation. What does the law say about what you can do as far as distributing, if anything, absentee ballots?
We can distribute
You can-
absentee ballots.
Okay.
It just has to be worked out with the person.
Okay.
And
They
that's-
have to apply that they want the absentee ballot? Yeah.
And that's I have to look into the process a little bit more on that. But my understanding is that it's become a little bit more simpler than it used to be.
Okay.
So
But you couldn't physically take an absentee ballot to them. They would have to request it in the mail?
they would have to request it in
Yeah,
the mail.
Yeah.
So
But if you set up a process of the request form
yeah,
coming to the place Yeah, it seemed to me that just eliminates
Yeah.
this whole thing of transportation.
But the challenge with that then also becomes is accessible polling places. And that's actually one of the concerns that I have as a professional disability advocate. When I walk into a polling place, I'm automatically looking to
Of
see
course.
if it's accessible. And I continually at a couple of different polling places in Oshkosh have some concerns on how the new voting machines are set up and placed when it comes to being able to, though they can move them around, they're much easily to be moved around and such. But at the same time, it shouldn't have to be moved around. It should have its spot, and that's where it is. But the idea of privacy when it comes to voting, and I actually of the contention, my personal contention is that our polling places aren't very private places anymore. Eric and I, and you guys probably all grew up in going to the local school and being able to close the
And
curtain.
you go tick, tick, tick,
Yeah.
tick, and then open the screen
Yeah.
and you're out. Yeah.
And and I remember those, and I remember that being private. Now I look at the polling places, and you've got the little carols, and they're semi-private.
Yeah.
They're not fully private. And so, when it comes to asking, I've had some problems asking poll workers to move the new machines around so that they're more private, because they have them open to the community and not turned around so that
That's a good
know,
point.
so-
On the other hand, you can't believe how many people go in there and want help. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
rather than pull the curtain back, I mean, they're looking around. And it's an intimidating process for a lot of people,
yeah.
and so they keep looking around for, and I say, well, I can't help you. I mean,
Yeah.
you can, so that's a problem too.
How many people do you figure that you need to actually transport people to the polls on election day?
Well, kind of our thought of trying to working that out is that we would do it. Ideally, we would do it by house.
Mm.
So we would first register as many people as we can in each group home, for those that are willing, and then we would work out a travel time for
Okay.
each home, and then we would work out personal travels to the polling places and such like that. I think we'll have providers on hand, and we'll also have personal drivers on hand.
It's a lot to coordinate, isn't it?
It is.
It's a huge,
It'll be an-
even just with a target of 20 people,
Yeah.
this is a huge undertaking that you guys are doing, and takes a lot of coordination and a lot of time. I think that we've probably throughout the half hour been putting up a phone number, but in case something happened from a technical standpoint and it didn't get up, if people want more information either about getting registered or volunteering to help with this, they can call 236-9230. And what is that a number to?
That is a number to ARC Winnebago County Disability Association.
All right.
He can say it, we can't.
Yes. All right. So in the 40 seconds that we have left,
Sure.
what would you like folks to know about People First and this particular project?
Thoughts?
Either one of you.
There we go. Sure. What we want to know is, we want people that are willing to help out and help us out with the project. We've been working with other organizations, but what we really need is the support of the community to make this happen.
Okay.
And so it's happening within the disabled community. We need everyone else to kind of jump in and say, hey, this is a great issue. It's not an issue. It shouldn't be an issue. Let's just make it happen.
Okay.
Let's just make it happen.
All right. And again, if you're interested in helping make it happen, 236-9230 is the number to call. So, Bob and Eric, thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
being here. We
Thanks.
appreciate it. Just sit tight. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Winnebago County Executive Mark Harris. We'll be right back.
We just escaped.
I escaped
I escaped
by foot.
and ran across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
Welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're very pleased to be joined now, as I mentioned before the break, by Winnebago County Executive Mark Harris. And, this is already almost the end of July, and budget hearings for all of our governing and taxing authorities will be starting relatively soon. And I think that indications are that this is going to be a pretty sorry state of affairs. So let's, now that we've set the tone for the next 30 minutes, where are we at from we've been reading just in the last week or so, Mark, about the sheriff's budget.
Yes.
That alone has, like, I think Sheriff Brooks said, $1 million gap in his budget. And he said it's due to, increased salaries, it's due to a decrease in state prisoners, it's due to the skyrocketing fuel costs, which are affecting every single department. So talk about those things a little bit as they relate to his budget, and then let's get into the overall budget.
Well, I think the primary pressure on the sheriff's budget, fuel increases do have an impact, but we've been boarding out-of-town prisoners. And of course, whenever you build a jail, if you're going to meet your needs long-term, when you first build it, you're going to have excess capacity because you build it to meet your needs sometime down the line. But with each passing year, we have more Winnebago County prisoners in the jail. And each time you add a Winnebago County prisoner, the cost of providing for that individual is the same as providing for an out-of-town individual. But with an out-of-town prisoner, we get between $50 and $60 a day in payments to us for providing that service. When that bed becomes occupied by a local resident, you don't get any revenue. So as the available number of beds to be leased out declines, that revenue dries up for the sheriff. And that's one of the primary things putting pressure on his budget. Now, very early in the summer, we give every department their budget targets. And this time they ranged, and we give our budget targets based on how much additional levy they can use in their budgets. Now, mind you, levy's only about a third of the county's revenue. Some departments have substantial other sources of revenue, either transfers from the federal or state government, or take, for instance, the airport. They get revenue every time they lease a hangar or for every takeoff and landing. There's lots of different sources of revenue, but that third of the revenue that's property taxes is how we budget them. And some departments got a 0% increase in that. Some got as much as a 3.5% increase for their first pass at the budget. But I know I'm limited by the levy freeze. And unlike last year where the rules of the game kept changing right up until the presentation of the budget to the board.
He was here when we were playing that game.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
This year we know what the rules are, and it's going to be the greater of new construction or 2%. I don't actually get the new construction number for a couple weeks, but the pattern in recent years is that every year that new construction number has been smaller. So I'm anticipating that 2% is about where we'll end up. That the new construction number won't be much higher than that, if higher, and more likely we'll be a little bit under, so we'll be at the 2% level.
So with respect to the sheriff's budget situation, you know, the decrease in state inmates, is there any way to get more state inmates, or is that just, it is what it is? And
Oh, the problem isn't the availability of out-of-town prisoners. The problem is
No, I know.
no empty beds.
Okay.
And you actually have to have, you can't actually fill your place up completely because your population changes during the week. You have to have the capacity to take a reasonable amount of additional prisoners over the weekend, for instance. So you can't fill every bed. You have to have the capacity to take in whatever you need over the weekend.
No, but he has had a decrease in some of the state inmates that he's been housing. Is there any hope of getting them or others back, or is that just gone?
No, he does have inmates in there now, and I don't think the problem is, we could find people to take the beds if we had the beds. The problem is we don't have the beds to lease out. We're filling up our capacity with local prisoners.
Okay.
You know, years ago they thought that as the population aged, that the jail populations would start to decline. We're just getting older prisoners.
Question on the jail?
Sure.
Seemed to me you played the jail game. And you know, the numbers have changed. I don't have a lot of sympathy personally about that, because you know, I don't know why you went into the jail game business to begin with. Why didn't you just keep the county prison, the county jail for county people?
Oh, that doesn't work, because when they built the jail, and it's getting to be almost 10 years now, the goal was to meet the demand for jail beds by this county for a 10-year period. And that's exactly where it's coming out. Their predictions were right on track, that by the end of the 10-year period, we'll fill every bed with a local prisoner. But obviously, if you built it to meet your need over the next 10 years, in the earlier years of that 10-year period, you're going to have empty beds. And the math of it is, are you better off with an empty bed or leasing that bed out to someone else to place prisoners there? And of course, we were making a profit by leasing those beds out. But as we projected, what we built for the jail was to meet the need for 10 years, and that's exactly where it's coming out. At the end of the 10-year period, it appears it will be full completely with local prisoners.
But Brooks's suggestion earlier was, let's go with another $10 million addition. Let's expand. Let's go more. It seems to me it's a game, and you know.
Well, if we become full at the end of the 10-year period with local prisoners, then the question is, what do you do over the next 10 years? And if that population continues to grow, you have to have the capacity. And again, if we do another project to meet the needs over the next 10 years, in years 1 through 9, you're going to have this diminishing capacity to lease out beds.
It seems, though, Mark, that we're never going to get caught up then in a case like that, because I mean, we still haven't, you know, paid off the debt on the jail that we have, and we're already at capacity, or very quickly will be at capacity. And you know, so let's say we bond out for another $10 million, $15 million addition, and then before we have that paid off, we'll be maxed out again. We're always playing catch up, it seems.
Yeah,
if we're doing
it kind of
that,
lines up fairly well, because we bond for 10 years. So, you know, 10 years after we start the jail project, the bonding for that project is done. But what you really hope is that at some point in time you don't have a growing jail population. You know, we're launching some alternative programs. We have the drug court program, the STOP program, which is aimed at drunk driving, which are intended to reduce recidivism and to keep people out of the jails. So we are doing some alternatives to slow that growth of population, and that's a good thing to do. But the alternative programs are probably not going to be enough, especially in an economic downturn, to hold that population down.
Isn't Sheriff Brooks always over budget? I mean, I read in the paper, I almost jumped out of my seat. He says, quote, "In my 14 years as sheriff, I have been very responsible in my budgeting. Seems like every 2 years I read that he needs more money, that he's over budget, and you guys always give it to him. Is that an unfair reading?"
It is a political position, and the board's politicians. there is a little gamesmanship in this.
Okay.
Where, by the sheriff announcing that he's over budget, what he's saying is the budget I would like to have would require an additional $1 million. Right. And he announces that, and that probably softens up opposition to that spending. Okay. But he really has been good. And this isn't the first year that at this phase we were $1 million off target on his budget. If you remember last time, he came in with a budget that was $1 million higher than the target I gave him. Yeah. And I said, I'll find a little extra money in other departments, but you can't be over by $1 million. That's when the decision was made to close the Huber Center and put those prisoners that were low security risks out on monitoring bracelets rather than having them at the Huber Center. And in truth, we have better control of where they're at with the bracelets because we know at any given moment. Whereas in Huber, you let them out during the day to go to work, and then they just came in and spent the night on your facility. Right. So we closed that facility. We used technology to displace the function that the Huber Center had been there for, and it allowed us to reduce 12 employees. Now, it's never fun to cut 12 employees, but if you look at the county as a whole, we're down probably 96 people now from where we were the day I got elected. And the current rules just require that.
Over the last few years, we've talked when you've been on the show and you've put your own money into this effort, that being a sales tax, a county sales tax, 0.5%. And when you first proposed it, Mark, I wasn't sure, on which side of the fence I was sitting on that thing. But, as more and more time has gone on, and we see budgets getting tighter and tighter, and you can only stretch $1 so far, I'm beginning to think that maybe, I'm not 100% sold yet, but I'm getting there, Mark. I'm getting there. I'm beginning to think that just maybe a county sales tax is an idea whose time has come. Because one of your ideas was, hey, look, we can get some property tax relief here, and other folks, tourists and such, can pay for it. We've got EAA coming. When this show airs, EAA will probably be over or at least be winding down. There's a whole lot of people coming from out of town, and wouldn't it be nice to capture some of those dollars for our use? Any plans to maybe present this idea again?
I won't be proposing that this year. When I proposed it last time, what I had built into the budget was a $7.5 million property tax cut. Combined, well, at least, actually that's not an accurate way to put it. The budget I proposed versus the budget we ended up with in that year, my budget had $7.5 million less property tax than the budget we ended up with. But I had $9 million of sales tax in there, and I also had $800,000 of sort of revenue sharing, where sales tax revenues were shared with cities and towns. So the county was keeping $800,000 of sales tax for its budget in the version I proposed. And the sales tax coming in from tourism and visitors is closer to $1 million. So in theory, the local residents were actually going to come out a little bit ahead. They would probably pay on average less sales tax than they saved on property tax. And when I built that into a budget, the property tax cut would have occurred that November after the budget was proposed. The sales tax wouldn't have come online until April 1st. But there was so much confusion and doubt in the public's mind that they really were going to get the property tax cut. I don't think they realized the property tax cut was actually going to come first. And if you build it into a budget, that's what determines their property taxes. So that, politically, I just don't think the county's ready for it. But a number of other counties have adopted it since then. The number that don't have it is diminishing. It realistically, someday it will happen, whether it's proposed by me or some subsequent county executive. There's such a few counties left that don't have it. Almost all of them, centered right around Lake Winnebago.
Well, but if you believe so strongly in it, and I know that you do, and you know that it's going to work in our favor, wouldn't it be better to just get out there and pound the pavement and make people understand your point of view or try to make them understand? Or is it that, you're going to have to run for re-election again and that's not a popular thing?
You know what? I think it's just too hard to explain to people. Other people can spend money and tell them they're not really going to get the property tax cut.
Well, but that argument will always be made.
Sure. But I think it's not, the time isn't ripe yet. I do think at some point in time, if this levy freeze limit stays in place, and if the demographics keep changing, because we've reached a point now where the property tax is actually the most regressive tax. The fact that you have a nice home doesn't mean that you have the level of income to support the property tax on it, because you've got a lot of retirees in homes that they bought when they were working. But I don't think the time is right. I'm not sure that I'll ever be proposing it again. I would not be surprised if sometime in the next 5 years it comes from the board, that they realize that they would rather deal with those issues than to make the additional cuts. We are getting to the point too where you can always get a little bit more efficient, but you can't cut personnel forever.
Right.
At some point in time, if you're going to continue to cut personnel, you have to pick services that you no longer will deliver.
When are you up for re-election? Next year?
Yeah, actually, I'm up in the spring of next year.
But in all honesty, this would be a tough issue for you to run in re-election if you did propose a 0.5% sales tax.
Well, that's true.
I mean, just reality, not getting into motives or anything, but that would be a tough thing to carry in a campaign, wouldn't it?
And I don't think the board's ready to support it either, because remember the first time I gave them two alternatives, a budget with the sales tax and a budget without, and they never even voted on or considered the sales tax. The next time I gave them a single budget, and the very first amendment brought forward by the board stripped out the sales tax and raised the property tax $7.5 million to displace that. It also stripped out the aid to cities and towns. But I have to tell you, the cities and towns are in more trouble. Menasha's in a very tough situation. I'm not sure the council in Oshkosh realizes what a tough situation they're facing.
I think you're right.
Because they lost those arbitrations, and the increase in payroll that they have to make clearly outstrips the additional revenues they can get under a levy freeze. And just like the county, I don't believe the city's going to have new construction above 2% of the base.
This is your most difficult budget in your first term?
It is, because this is the first year where I'm projecting new construction to be below 2%. In the other years, we had 2.5% new construction, 3% new construction. And if you'll remember, last year the governor used his veto power to change the levy freeze limit to like 3.86.
Which helped out a little bit. So give us kind of a preview, Mark, of what we can expect come budget time.
I actually think it's going to come out okay, because we have been preparing for this. Our county's been a little bit more aggressive at cutting expenses than others, and we've actually built up our reserves. When I came into office, the reserves for the county were only about 2 weeks operating expenses. We've built those up a little bit each year. We're very just shy of 1 month's operating expenses and reserves, although if you get some sort of catastrophe, those can be exhausted very quickly. If we continue to see erosion in the property tax base, imagine if real estate were to fall another 10%. And every time real estate turns over that's sold below the assessed value, that's erosion of the tax base. That's going to put pressure on the whole system too.
Sure.
How about projects? Are you going to just say no to Pleasant Acres and purchase more land for the airport, and are you going to get out of the Tri-County arena? I mean, are those cost-saving things you're looking at?
Well, most of those things are capital. They're exceptions to the levy freeze. But I think it's a real mistake to say, gee, this is a tight budget year. Let's put off decisions that are good for the community in the long term, because we're always going to be under tight budgets. So if I say, gee, having additional land at the airport so we could locate industry there, that's a good thing to do, but we won't do it this year because it's a tough budget year, that would be a real mistake. You've got to think of what is best for the county in the long run. So we'll continue to do what we think is best. There's savings to us if we can remodel Pleasant Acres, if we can get the DA's office out of leased property and into county-owned property.
From the beach lease, you'd save money.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
we pay the property taxes for that. You know, that building's condominiumized. We pay the property taxes on that floor. If we're in our own space, we're tax exempt, for instance. We also have 2 operations still in the basement of the pavilion, and that building's scheduled to come down. And there's a window in which it has to come down, or we end up paying additional stormwater fees. You know, and the county pays $250,000 a year in stormwater fees to the city of Oshkosh. I don't know if people know that the county is subject to those fees.
Yeah, we heard that from somebody who was on this show at one point not too long ago,
Yeah.
I thought. So, okay, well, so the county's not in as bad a shape as the city is. Aren't you glad you're no longer on the city council and you're in county government now?
I think the city council is going to face the toughest budget they've ever had. And I hope they take the same attitude that, you know, we're going to have to make tough decisions to get through this, but let's not lose sight of what's good for the city in the long term. And I think they will.
Have you had a chance to meet the new city manager yet?
You know, I've had a lot of contact with him from
Through the-
countywide meetings, so I do know him.
Yeah.
And I think he'll do a great job. I also think Mr. Fitzpatrick did a great job
Yes, he
while he
did.
was
I think
serving as
that's
interim.
a good point, yes.
Yeah.
He really did. Did you have anything else
No,
on the
I'm
budget?
good.
Okay. We're taping this just a week before EAA starts, and of course, by the time it airs, EAA, like I said, will be over or winding down. But it's coming at a time just when the new air traffic control tower was
That's correct.
put in and so forth. And as a county executive, even though those were mostly federal dollars, if not all, I mean, isn't it nice to see projects that come to fruition and get done and in a timely manner?
It is, and the tower, as I understand it, has come out well. To a certain extent, that's been detached from the county, even though that's our airport. That was the FAA people that worked on it. And in fact, for the grand opening, they initially omitted inviting anybody from the county. Because
that was maybe by design or just by accident.
But we're pleased to have that project done. Any project that doesn't hit my local budget is less painful than those that do.
You mentioned something earlier, Mark, almost at the beginning of when we started talking. I thought that was kind of interesting. You said that the county gets paid for each takeoff and landing out at the airport?
Yes.
What about during EAA? What happens then?
I believe we get a fee for all of that.
Really?
Yeah.
But what's the fee?
I couldn't tell you the dollar amount, but I think we also get revenue when fuel is pumped out there.
Okay.
The airport generates about half of its budget through lease payments and fees. And there actually is more activity there than anybody imagines. We have more takeoffs and landings from that airport than Straubel Airport has. But we don't have passenger service, so you view it very different. But a lot of private aircraft coming in and out all the time.
That's interesting.
Go ahead.
Any big surprises coming up, other than the budget? Anything that we should kind of be attuned
Well,
to? Things, developments that you could share with us?
Well, there's always these stresses. Most of our revenue still comes from the state and the federal government. And the state and the federal government are not in good financial state. And so we're seeing, they're continuing to phase out the federal monies for child support enforcement. The MEG unit grant has been eliminated entirely.
The job center closing?
Well, the state, they're pulling people out of the job center, but that might have a domino-like effect because we cover the cost of the lease based on office space occupied by people from the agencies that run the job center. And that's largely a state function. That's not the county's function, although we did pick up half of one salary to keep it fully staffed in recent years. That's really not our function. And if the state pulls 4 people out of there, it's going to be very hard to keep that open. And it certainly won't have the same staffing levels. But that's a case where the money flowing from the federal government to the state has been declining. And the state has said, we just can't keep all these centers open. We are lucky in that there will be a center remaining open in Menasha. The center in Oshkosh may remain open for a time. but I don't think it can be sustained indefinitely. I don't have any resources at the county to pour into there to displace resources being pulled out by the state or by any of the other agencies that are operating out of there.
Okay.
Healthcare costs. Can you give us, I mean, how bad are they? And
We're estimating 10 to 11%.
okay.
But remember, our last union contract over the 3-year period has most of the unions paying an additional $760 per year towards their health insurance. So
Negotiated in the contract.
yes,
Yeah.
you know, the contracts are still more than what we can pull out of the levy freeze.
Right.
But I can't say they were unfair because the wages are probably going to go up a little less than inflation over that time period. And they agreed to a substantial increase in their contribution towards the health insurance. So while management didn't get everything they wanted, labor didn't get everything they wanted, I think overall the contracts are fair and everybody's making a little sacrifice. But it does leave us in a position where, because the pay goes up faster than the money you can pull from the levy freeze, the total number of people you employ probably has to continue to shrink.
We've only got a couple minutes left, but just let's just throw this out here. You know, states can enact smoking bans. Cities can enact smoking bans. Can a county enact a smoking ban in public places?
They may be able to, but it's probably not the proper authority because we're not the ones that do the inspections on the restaurants. And, you know, it's reached a point now where it's probably time for the state to step up and do the statewide
Yeah, well,
ban.
you're right, we have passed the point.
Yeah, it gets an even playing field out there. And, you know, the surrounding states have already passed statewide replace bans. So,
We're waiting.
why not Wisconsin?
It is too bad, though, that, you know, if the state's unwilling to do it, that the county can't step up. And does the county not have any kind of public health department at all that could do inspections?
We do, but remember, our authority for public health is only outside those jurisdictions that have their own health departments. And, you know, what you really don't want to do is set up the regimen where one business on one side of the line has one set of rules and a business on the other side has a different set of rules. It's time to do this statewide and make it all even. And I'll be honest, I think people would be pretty accepting of it.
Okay, all right, good. Well, we are just about out of time. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
All right, we'll have you back again, probably around budget time or just after.
Sure.
So, all right, very good. Thanks to the crew. Thanks to our guests on both of the segments during this show, and thanks to you at home. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.